The first red flag should have been when Dana Blake smiled too widely at my Everclimb Ventures proposal. But I was exhausted. 3 months of 18-hour days will do that to you, and I mistook her enthusiasm for genuine support. I'm Ava Morgan, 29, Strategic Partnerships Associate at Ridgecrest Dynamics. We're a mid-sized tech consulting firm in Chicago that specializes in helping Fortune 500 companies navigate digital transformations. It's the kind of place where everyone talks about synergistic solutions and paradigm shifts while drinking overpriced coffee from the lobby machine. The Everclimb Ventures account was my white whale. A $2.4 million sustainable energy company looking to revolutionize their client acquisition strategy. When our business development team landed the initial meeting, they immediately flagged it as a high-complexity, high-reward engagement. Corporate speak for this could make or break someone's career. Dana, my manager and head of strategic partnerships, assigned it to me in March with her typical theatrical flair. Ava, I'm trusting you with something special here. Everclimb could be our biggest win this quarter. Show me what that brilliant mind of yours can do. She had this way of making you feel chosen, like you were part of some exclusive inner circle. I threw myself into the research with a kind of obsessive focus that probably worried my friends but felt natural to me. Everclimb wasn't just another tech startup. They were developing proprietary battery storage systems for renewable energy grids. Their challenge wasn't technical, it was strategic. They needed to pivot from B2B infrastructure sales to direct consumer partnerships while maintaining their enterprise relationships. The solution I developed was elegant in its complexity. I called it the dual-track acceleration model, a phased approach that would allow Everclimb to test consumer markets in targeted geographic clusters while leveraging their existing enterprise contracts as proof-of-concept showcases. The key innovation was a custom CRM integration that would track consumer behavior patterns and feed that data back into their enterprise sales cycle, creating a feedback loop that strengthened both channels simultaneously. I spent nights at the office until security guards started recognizing me by name. My apartment began to feel like a hotel room I occasionally visited to shower and change clothes. I built financial projections showing a 340% ROI over 18 months. I created detailed implementation timelines broken into 6-week sprints. I even designed custom dashboard mockups showing how the data would flow between their consumer and enterprise platforms. The presentation deck grew to 42 slides of pure strategic gold. Market analysis backed by McKinsey research. Competitive landscape mapping that identified 3 key gaps Everclimb could exploit. Revenue projections that made even my pessimistic accountant brain excited. This wasn't just a consulting proposal, it was a roadmap to transform their entire business model. My colleague Imani Clark, a fellow analyst who sits 2 cubicles over, watched me pour my soul into this project. She'd bring me coffee when I forgot to eat and listen to my rambling explanations of why consumer acquisition costs would decrease by 23% in Phase 2. You realize you're basically redesigning their entire company, right? She said one evening as I explained my integrated dashboard concept for the 100th time. That's the point, I replied, highlighting another section of market research. Anyone can suggest incremental improvements. This is going to be transformational. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, an introverted analyst who preferred spreadsheets to small talk, developing a revolutionary business strategy that would require unprecedented coordination between sales, marketing, and product development teams. But that's what made it beautiful. The strategy was so elegant that it would practically implement itself. 2 weeks before the scheduled client presentation, I finally felt ready to share my masterpiece with Dana. I compiled everything into a comprehensive deck, added executive summary slides, and sent it to her with a detailed email explaining each section. Dana, attached is the complete Everclimb strategy. I'm excited to walk through this with you and get your feedback before we present to the client. I think this could be exactly what they need. Her response came back within an hour. Fantastic work, Ava. This looks comprehensive. Let me review everything and we'll schedule time to discuss refinements. Great job. I felt a surge of professional pride. 3 months of relentless work, and my manager was genuinely impressed. Maybe this was how careers were built, one transformational strategy at a time. What I didn't know was that Dana had already forwarded my deck to her personal Gmail account before she'd even finished reading her response to me. The first hint something was wrong came during our weekly team meeting the following Monday. Dana was presenting quarterly updates to our senior leadership group, myself, Imani, 2 other analysts, and our director of client relations. As she clicked through her slides, I heard familiar phrases. Very familiar phrases. Our approach to Everclimb will center on what I'm calling a dual-track acceleration model, Dana explained confidently to the room. The key innovation is creating a feedback loop between consumer and enterprise channels that strengthens both simultaneously. My stomach dropped. Those weren't just similar ideas, those were my exact words, pulled from page 6 of my strategy document. I glanced at Imani, who was staring at Dana with barely concealed shock. She'd heard me explain this concept dozens of times over the past month. But Dana continued presenting my framework as if she'd conceived it herself, complete with my financial projections and implementation timeline. Questions? Dana asked brightly, clicking to her final slide. I raised my hand slowly. Dana, this sounds very similar to the research I've been developing. Should I present my detailed analysis as a follow-up? Her smile faltered for just a moment. Of course, Ava. Your research has been valuable input into this strategy. We'll make sure you're appropriately involved in the implementation. Input. My 3 months of revolutionary strategic work had become valuable input. After the meeting, Imani cornered me in the break room. That was your entire presentation. Word for word. How is she getting away with this? I don't know, I admitted, feeling a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is how these things work at senior levels. But even as I said it, I knew something was deeply wrong. And when Imani mentioned that she'd overheard Dana scheduling a private meeting with Gavin Trujillo, our CEO, to discuss her breakthrough strategy for the Everclimb account, I realized exactly how wrong things were about to get. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a plan to confront Dana directly. Professional, diplomatic, but clear about my contributions to the Everclimb strategy. I'd rehearsed the conversation during my entire commute. Dana, I want to make sure we're aligned on how to present the Everclimb work. Since I developed the core framework, I think it makes sense for me to take the lead on the technical sections. But when I walked past the conference room at 9:15 a.m., I saw Dana inside with Gavin Trujillo, our CEO, presenting to a whiteboard covered in diagrams that looked suspiciously like my consumer enterprise integration model. Through the glass wall, I watched Gavin nod approvingly as Dana pointed to revenue projections I'd spent 2 weeks calculating. She was animated, confident, completely in her element. And why wouldn't she be? She was presenting brilliant work that she genuinely believed in, because I'd created it for her. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, watching my career get stolen in real time. Then I walked to my desk, sat down, and stared at my computer screen without seeing anything. You look like you've seen a ghost, Imani said, appearing at my cubicle with 2 cups of coffee. Worse. I just watched Dana present my entire strategy to the CEO as her own work. Imani set down the coffee and pulled up a chair. Okay. What are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? In my 3 years at Ridgecrest Dynamics, I'd watched Dana take credit for other people's work before. She had a talent for positioning herself as the strategic visionary while her team provided the tactical execution. It was frustrating, but most people seemed to accept it as normal corporate hierarchy. But this felt different. This wasn't just taking credit for a good idea in a meeting. This was intellectual property theft. 3 months of my life, reduced to a footnote in Dana's career advancement. I need to document everything, I said finally. Timestamps, email records, everything that proves this was my work. Smart. But you need more than documentation. You need someone with power to actually care about the truth. That's when I thought of Leo Han, our IT systems analyst. Leo and I had worked together on several client data integration projects, and he had a reputation for being both technically brilliant and refreshingly honest about corporate politics. If anyone could help me build an airtight case, it would be him. I found Leo in the server room, surrounded by blinking lights and the constant hum of cooling systems. He looked up from his laptop when I knocked on the doorframe. Ava, what brings you to my digital cave? I need a favor. And probably some advice about corporate espionage. Leo raised an eyebrow. Those are usually different conversations. Come in, close the door. I explained the situation, Dana's presentation, the stolen strategy, the meeting with Gavin. Leo listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding in recognition. Dana Blake, he said when I finished. Yeah, I've heard stories. She's got a pattern of taking credit for other people's technical work. Usually, people just accept it and move on. Well, I'm not most people. Leo grinned. No, you're definitely not. Okay, let's see what we can prove. He pulled up his email server monitoring system. When did you send her the original deck? Last Tuesday, around 6 p.m. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Here it is. Email sent to Dana Blake. Timestamp shows she opened it at 6:23 p.m. And, interesting. He paused, highlighting something on his screen. She forwarded it to her personal Gmail account at 6:31 p.m. Is that normal? Forwarding company strategy documents to personal email? Absolutely not. That's actually a potential compliance violation. Leo made a few more clicks. And here's where it gets interesting. She accessed the forwarded version from her personal email again on Thursday morning, right before her meeting with Gavin. The evidence was damning, but I needed more than IT logs. I needed a strategy. Leo, hypothetically, if someone wanted to make sure senior leadership understood the true source of a strategic proposal, how would they do that? Hypothetically, they'd create a clear paper trail showing their work development process. And they'd make sure the right people saw that paper trail. The right people. Well, if Dana's presenting your work to the CEO, maybe the CEO should understand where that work actually came from. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a legal pad, planning my approach. I wasn't going to march into Gavin's office with accusations and demands. That would be career suicide. Instead, I was going to build an irrefutable case, one email at a time. I started with a comprehensive summary of my Everclimb research process. 3 pages detailing my methodology, data sources, analytical framework, and development timeline. I attached my original research notes, complete with dates and version numbers. Then I crafted an email that was professional, factual, and completely devastating. Subject: Everclimb Ventures Strategy Development, Progress Update. Hi Dana. I wanted to provide a comprehensive update on my progress with the Everclimb Ventures strategic analysis. Over the past 3 months, I've developed what I believe is a transformational approach to their consumer enterprise integration challenge. Attached you'll find my complete research documentation, including initial market analysis, completed March 15th, competitive landscape mapping, completed March 28th, financial projection models, completed April 12th, implementation timeline and resource requirements, completed May 3rd. The core framework, which I've termed the dual-track acceleration model, addresses their need to simultaneously develop consumer markets while leveraging existing enterprise relationships. I'm confident this approach will deliver the ROI they're looking for. I'm excited to present this to the Everclimb team and would appreciate your feedback on the presentation structure. Best regards, Ava. Before I hit send, I added one more recipient to the BCC line, gavin.trujillo@ridgecrestdynamics.com. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. This was my line in the sand. Once I sent this email, there would be no going back. Dana would eventually realize what I was doing, and she wouldn't take it quietly. But as I thought about watching her present my work to the CEO, about 3 months of my life being erased from corporate memory, about the pattern of credit theft that Leo had hinted at, I realized I didn't have a choice. I hit send. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a documentary filmmaker of my own career. Every update I sent to Dana, I BCC'd to Gavin. Every revision to the strategy, every piece of additional research, every email thread about client preferences, all of it copied to the CEO with surgical precision. I wasn't being sneaky or manipulative. I was simply ensuring that the person making final decisions about our company's strategic direction had access to complete information about how that strategy was being developed. Dana began to sense something was shifting. She started asking more pointed questions about my research process. She scheduled impromptu one-on-one meetings to discuss team collaboration and appropriate communication channels. But she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong. Ava, she said during one of these meetings, leaning back in her chair with practiced casualness, I've been getting the sense that you might be feeling overlooked on the Everclimb project. I want you to know that your contributions are valued. I appreciate that, Dana. I just want to make sure the client gets the best possible strategic guidance. Of course. But I also want to make sure we're presenting a unified front. When we're in client meetings, it's important that I take the lead on strategic positioning while you focus on the analytical details. Translation: stay in your lane and let me take credit for your work. Absolutely, I replied. I think our approach should reflect whoever did the core strategic development. Dana's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Right. Well, strategy development is a team effort. We all contribute different pieces. 2 days later, she scheduled a meeting that would change everything: EverClimb strategy review, mid-quarter executive presentation. The agenda showed Dana presenting her breakthrough strategy to the senior leadership team, with Gavin Trujillo in attendance. That night, I sent one final BCC'd email to the CEO. This one included a complete timeline of my work, cross-referenced with Dana's meeting schedules and email communications. It was 3 pages of meticulous documentation that told a very clear story about who had developed what, and when. The subject line read, EverClimb strategy development, complete documentation for your review. I was about to find out if 3 months of quiet rebellion would be enough to take down a credit thief. The morning of the mid-quarter review, I arrived at the office 30 minutes early and spent the time organizing my research files. Not because I expected to present. Dana had made it clear that this was her moment to shine, but because I wanted to be prepared for whatever came next. The executive conference room was Ridgecrest Dynamics crown jewel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a 20-person mahogany table, and wall-mounted screens that made every presentation look like a NASA mission briefing. It was designed to intimidate, and it worked. Dana swept in 10 minutes before the meeting, wheeling a silver laptop cart and projecting the kind of confident energy that had made her successful. She nodded at me with what I now recognized as condescending warmth. Ready for the big show, Ava? This is going to be exciting. Definitely ready, I replied, settling into my designated chair halfway down the table. Gavin Trujillo entered precisely at 9 a.m., followed by Rachel Chow from HR, our Director of Client Relations, and 2 VPs I rarely interacted with. Gavin was exactly what you'd expect from a tech consulting CEO: sharp suit, silver hair, the kind of intense focus that made everyone else in the room slightly nervous. Morning, everyone, Gavin said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Dana, I understand you have some breakthrough strategic work to share with us regarding the EverClimb account. I do indeed, Dana replied, clicking to her first slide. The title read, EverClimb Ventures, Revolutionary Strategic Framework by Dana Blake. My jaw clenched involuntarily. She hadn't just stolen my work, she'd literally put her name on it. Dana launched into her presentation with practiced enthusiasm, clicking through slides that I could have recited from memory. She explained the market analysis, the competitive landscape, the revolutionary dual-track acceleration model that would transform EverClimb's business approach. The key innovation here, Dana said, reaching slide 15, is creating what I call a consumer enterprise feedback loop. By tracking consumer behavior patterns and feeding that data back into enterprise sales cycles, we can strengthen both channels simultaneously. She was word perfect. Every technical detail, every financial projection, every implementation milestone, delivered with the confidence of someone who had genuinely developed the strategy herself. I watched Gavin during the presentation. His expression was unreadable, but I noticed him occasionally glancing at his phone. Was he checking email? Taking notes? Completely bored by corporate strategy presentations? Dana reached her final slide, a timeline showing 18 months of implementation phases that would deliver a 340% ROI. Questions? She asked, beaming with accomplishment. That's when Gavin leaned forward slightly and asked the question that would change everything. Dana, this is impressive work. But I'm curious about the development process. Who was responsible for creating the original analytical framework? The room went quiet. Dana's confident smile flickered for just a moment before returning full strength. Well, Gavin, this was very much a collaborative effort. My team provided valuable research support while I developed the strategic vision and implementation framework. I see. And when you say team, you're referring to? Primarily Ava, our strategic partnerships associate. She's done excellent analytical work under my guidance. Gavin nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out his phone. That's interesting. Because I've been reviewing some project documentation that suggests a different development timeline. My heart started racing. He was reading my emails. All those BCC'd updates, the detailed research timeline, the comprehensive work documentation, he'd been paying attention to every word. Dana, Gavin continued, according to the documentation I've received, the core strategic framework was developed independently by Ava over a 3-month period. Your name first appears in the communication chain when she sent you the completed strategy for review. The room's energy shifted dramatically. Dana's face went through several color changes before settling on a pale shade that didn't look healthy. Well, Gavin, I think there might be some confusion about roles and responsibilities. As the Strategic Partnerships Manager, I naturally take ownership of major client strategies developed by my team. Taking ownership is different from claiming authorship, Gavin replied coolly. Ava, would you mind joining us at this end of the table? My legs felt unsteady as I moved to the chair next to Gavin. Dana was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part fury, part disbelief, part dawning recognition that her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing. Ava, Gavin said, can you walk us through your development process for the Everclimb strategy? For the next 20 minutes, I presented my actual work. Not slides stolen from my research, but the real development process, late nights analyzing market data, weeks spent building financial models, the breakthrough moment when I realized how consumer and enterprise channels could reinforce each other, the careful refinement of implementation timelines. I showed them my original research notes, complete with timestamps. I explained my data sources and analytical methodology. I walked through each phase of strategy development with a kind of detailed knowledge that only comes from actually doing the work. Dana tried to interrupt several times, but Gavin held up a hand. Let her finish. When I concluded, the room was silent for what felt like an eternity. Thank you, Ava, Gavin said finally. That was illuminating. He turned to Dana. Do you have anything to add? Dana's confident facade had completely cracked. I want to emphasize that as Ava's manager, I provided strategic guidance throughout this process. The final presentation represents a synthesis of team input under my leadership. Gavin pulled up something on his laptop and rotated the screen so everyone could see it. It was my original email to Dana, time-stamped 2 weeks earlier, with a complete strategy attached. Dana, this email shows Ava sending you a fully developed strategic framework. Your response was fantastic work, Ava. This looks comprehensive. That doesn't sound like ongoing strategic guidance. That sounds like receiving completed work. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning cycling on and off. Furthermore, Gavin continued, our IT systems show that you forwarded this strategy document to your personal email account 8 minutes after receiving it, before presenting it to me as your own work 3 days later. Rachel Chow from HR was taking detailed notes, her expression professionally neutral but her pen moving rapidly across her legal pad. Dana's last-ditch effort was pure desperation. Gavin, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my role in. Dana. Gavin's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. I'm going to stop you there. Rachel, would you mind escorting Dana to your office? I think we need to have a broader conversation about professional conduct and intellectual property. As Dana gathered her things, she shot me a look that promised this wasn't over. But her hands were shaking as she closed her laptop, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't intimidated by her presence. After they left, Gavin turned to the remaining team. This meeting is obviously taking a different direction than planned. Let's reconvene tomorrow to discuss next steps for the Everclimb presentation. As people filed out, Gavin asked me to stay behind. Ava, he said when we were alone, I owe you an apology. This should never have gotten this far. Thank you for listening to the evidence. Your BCC strategy was clever. Risky, but clever. You documented everything without making accusations, just presented facts and let me draw conclusions. I felt a mix of relief and vindication. I just wanted the truth to be clear. It is now. And I want you to know that you'll be presenting the Everclimb strategy yourself. This is your work, and you deserve the recognition. Walking back to my desk, I felt like I was moving through a different office than the one I'd entered that morning. Imani looked up as I approached, her eyebrows raised in a silent question. Dana's been suspended pending investigation, I said quietly. Holy shit, she whispered. You actually did it. We'll see. Nothing's final yet. But even as I said it, I knew something fundamental had shifted. For 3 months, I'd watched my work get stolen and stayed quiet. Today, I'd fought back and won. The real test would be whether the victory lasted. The following week passed in a surreal blur of hushed conversations and sideways glances. Dana's office remained empty, her nameplate still on the door like a placeholder for a ghost. According to official communications, she was taking personal time to address family matters, corporate speak for suspended while we figure out how fired she's going to be. I spent that week preparing for the Everclimb presentation with a mixture of excitement and terror. This was my strategy, my analysis, my 3 months of late-night brilliance, but I'd never presented to a $2.4 million client before. The difference between impressing my colleagues and landing a transformational contract felt enormous. Leo from IT stopped by my desk on Wednesday with coffee and gossip. So I heard through the server logs that Dana's been trying to access her work email from home, he said, settling into Imani's empty chair. Multiple failed login attempts. Someone changed her password. That was fast. Rachel Chow doesn't mess around. When HR decides to investigate intellectual property theft, they lock everything down immediately. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Also, word is that Dana's not the first person to have these kinds of issues. Apparently, there's been a pattern. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been expecting and dreading in equal measure. Rachel Chow asking me to come to her office for a follow-up conversation. HR offices are designed to be comforting and intimidating simultaneously. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and enough legal documentation to remind you that every word might end up in a court filing. Rachel gestured for me to sit across from her desk, which was notably organized with several file folders. Ava, I want to start by thanking you for bringing this situation to light. Intellectual property theft is something we take very seriously at Ridgecrest Dynamics. I appreciate you investigating so thoroughly. Our investigation is actually complete, Rachel said, opening the thickest folder. And I want to share our findings with you before we make any final decisions. She pulled out a timeline that looked like a legal document, dates, email timestamps, access logs, and cross-referenced evidence that painted a damning picture of Dana's behavior. But it wasn't just about my Everclimb strategy. We found evidence of similar conduct on 3 other client engagements over the past 18 months, Rachel continued. Strategic frameworks developed by team members, then presented by Dana as her own work. Your situation was just the most recent and best documented. The vindication felt overwhelming. I wasn't being overly sensitive or misunderstanding corporate dynamics. Dana had been systematically stealing credit from her team. What happens now? Dana Blake's employment with Ridgecrest Dynamics has been terminated, effective immediately. She'll receive standard severance but will not be eligible for rehire. Rachel closed the folder with finality. We're also implementing new documentation requirements for strategic work to prevent future incidents. I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and a surprising amount of sadness. I hadn't wanted to destroy Dana's career, I just wanted credit for my own work. There's one more thing, Rachel said. Gavin would like to see you in his office at 4 p.m. Gavin's office was intimidating in a completely different way than the HR suite. Where Rachel's space was designed for comfort, Gavin's was built for power. Massive desk, panoramic city views, and walls covered with awards and strategic partnership certificates. Sit down, Ava, he said, gesturing to one of 2 leather chairs facing his desk. I want to discuss your future here. My stomach clenched. Future? Was I being promoted or fired for causing problems? First, I owe you a formal apology. Dana's conduct was unacceptable, and it should have been identified and stopped much earlier. That's a management failure on my part. Thank you, I appreciate that. Second, I want to discuss the Everclimb presentation. You're scheduled to present your strategy to their executive team next Tuesday. Are you ready? Absolutely. It's my work, I know it better than anyone. Gavin smiled for the first time since I'd known him. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. But presenting your own strategy is just the beginning. I've been reviewing your work over the past year, and your analytical capabilities are exceptional. He pulled out another folder. Apparently, everyone had been doing research this week. I'm offering you a promotion to Senior Strategic Lead, effective immediately. 15% salary increase, stock options, and you'll be leading our strategic partnerships development for the next fiscal year. The words took a moment to process. 3 weeks ago, I was a mid-level analyst watching my manager steal my work. Now I was being offered her job, essentially. That's, wow. Yes, absolutely yes. There's one condition, Gavin continued. I want you to hire your own team. 2 junior analysts to start, with budget for additional hires based on performance. You'll report directly to me rather than through the previous departmental structure. We spent the next hour discussing expectations, strategic priorities, and the kind of analytical framework Ridgecrest Dynamics would need to compete at the next level. It was the most substantive professional conversation I'd ever had, and I left his office feeling like I was walking into a completely different career. The Everclimb presentation the following Tuesday was a masterpiece of preparation meeting opportunity. I walked their executive team through every element of the dual-track acceleration model, answered technical questions that no one else could have fielded, and watched their faces light up as they realized the transformational potential of the strategy. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," their CEO said as I concluded. "When can we get started?" They signed the contract that afternoon. $2.4 million, 18-month engagement, with performance bonuses that could push the total value over $3 million. The biggest deal in Ridgecrest Dynamics history, and it was built on strategy I developed in my cramped cubicle during 3 months of 18-hour days. That evening, Imani, Leo, and I met at the Hollow Fox, a downtown bar that specialized in craft cocktails and celebrating professional victories. I'd changed out of my presentation suit into jeans and a sweater, but I still felt like I was wearing someone else's life. "To quiet revenge done right," Leo said, raising his whiskey. "To documentation," Imani added, lifting her wine glass. "To 3 months of work that finally got the recognition it deserved," I concluded. We clinked glasses, and I took a sip of the most expensive bourbon I'd ever ordered. It tasted like victory and vindication and the promise of a career where my work would be valued rather than stolen. "So what's it like being management?" Imani asked. "Terrifying and exciting in equal measure. I'm hiring 2 junior analysts next month. Want to apply?" "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I need people who understand that good work deserves proper recognition." As we talked about the future, I reflected on the past month. I'd gone from watching my manager present my work as her own to presenting that same work to a multi-million-dollar client as the senior strategic lead. The transformation felt impossible and inevitable simultaneously. Dana had tried to contact me twice since her termination, voicemails asking to clear the air and discuss what really happened. I'd deleted both messages without listening to them completely. There was nothing to discuss. The evidence had spoken for itself. 3 weeks later, I got a LinkedIn message from a former colleague at Dana's new company. Apparently, she'd been hired as a strategic partnerships consultant and was already taking credit for innovative methodologies she developed at her previous role. Some people never learn. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had a team to build, clients to serve, and strategies to develop. Real strategies, with my name on them, developed by people who would get full credit for their contributions. The Everclimb engagement became a case study for our entire industry. Their consumer enterprise integration model exceeded every performance target, and the success story landed us 3 additional clients in the first quarter. My team expanded to 5 analysts, then 8, then 12. A year later, I was promoted to Director of Strategic Innovation, overseeing the analytical framework for all major client engagements. I still worked long hours, but now they were fueled by ownership and recognition rather than quiet resentment. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never sent that first BCC'd email to Gavin. Would Dana still be presenting other people's work as her own? Would I still be sitting in my cubicle, watching credit for my best ideas get stolen by someone with better political skills? But those questions don't keep me awake anymore. I learned that quiet documentation, strategic communication, and unwavering commitment to truth can overcome even the most entrenched office politics. And every time I see my name on a presentation slide, introducing work that I actually created, I remember why it was all worth it. The best revenge isn't just getting even, it's getting the recognition you deserved all along. Author's note: Dana Blake did attempt to sue Ridgecrest Dynamics for wrongful termination, claiming that taking credit for teamwork was standard management practice. The lawsuit was dismissed when her legal team reviewed the documentation evidence. She dropped the case within 3 months, reportedly after her new employer became aware of the allegations. Some battles win themselves.